This video covers scaling your self-hosted n8n application, starting from a local development setup to cloud deployment. We'll start with a local containerized setup, and then we'll transition to using infrastructure as code like Pulumi or Terraform to move it to the cloud. I might make this a series with multiple parts, but today we'll focus on 4 foundations. First, running n8n locally using the official Docker image. Then second, connecting Postgres for persistent data storage instead of local volumes. Third is enabling queue mode to support horizontal scaling. Then fourth, building a custom n8n image for additional modules and custom nodes. And then after that, we'll see where we get to. All right, let's start. Okay, so let's start with just running a out-of-the-box image of n8n. Let me just show you the images that we have right now. I downloaded them before this, so you don't have to watch me do it one by one. Alright, let's check the container. Cool. Now, let me just run this on port 5678, which is the usual, and then put in the version that we're going to use, and I'll be mapping this to a local volume, data n8n. Oops. I know this is, we have to change the permissions of this folder. Let me just put in 777 for now. Okay, cool. Alright, let me try that again. Right, and let me just go, it's 5678, right? Let me load that up. Okay, so it's working out of the box using Docker. So we got that one ticked. Right now it's second one. Basically want to have this connected to Postgres so we don't have to rely on mapping n8n to local directories. So that's what we're going to do next. Let me create a Docker Compose file. Let's start with the n8n. Basically what we're doing is moving the flags that we used when we run the script earlier, the terminal script, and moving it to this file. That way you can easily, we don't have to rewrite it every time we move to like different terminals, or this makes it easier. Okay, cool. Start with the image, and then the container name, and then obviously the port. So that's our n8n service. Let me run Docker Compose up and try it out on the browser, see if it works, and it still runs the same as before. Cool, that worked. So let me create a .env file where we'll put all the environment variables for our containers. I forgot to add the volume, so let me add the volume. Let me just double check that really worked. Okay, that's working. So it's expecting, so you see editor is now accessible via port. Since we have n8n, now we'll add Postgres. Let me check the image version we have. Okay, 70.6 port, and map it to, again, local folder for right now, and then again use the env file that we created, so that we'll dump all the environment variables on there. So we'll remove the volume so that we can test if it does open up while mapped to a Postgres DB for persistence. Now earlier we were using SQLite for the DB type. I'm going to update that to use Postgres DB. Okay, there you go. That worked. Right, so that worked. Okay, next I'm going to create a makefile. This will help make it easier for me to start and stop the containers. Start with an up target, which basically does the Docker Compose up. Then I'm going to add a down target to make sure that everything is shut down first before starting the containers. Another thing I forgot to add are the Postgres credentials. So I'll just add these on the local environment, and then let's try running it again. Let me try and register a user right here. Okay. Send it, and there you go. License key is on the way, and that worked. So now let's do a little bit of a cleanup first on this one. There you'll notice here, let me run makeup first. And then you'll see there are a couple of things that I would say that, like, trying to make sure that these are the recommended variable setups and all that. So we'll try to add that to our environment variable. First one is n8n runners enabled. True. And then the encryption key, let me just do a random test key there. And then here's another one, n8n enforce settings file and permissions. Set that up. Let me run that again. Alright, so here you'll see that there's none of those warnings in this. So try to follow all those warnings that they put in there, because there's a reason why they have that. So next thing on our list is queue mode. If you look through the n8n documentation, it'll show you what you need in much more detail. After reading through this, I've made my own version to help you visualize what's going on in the process. So let's get through the steps. First is creating the execution ID and workflow data on Redis and Postgres respectively. Then the workers will start picking up these IDs from Redis and grabs the data from Postgres. Once it gets the data, it will process the workflow and updates Postgres and Redis when it's done. The main editor will then pick up the execution ID status from Redis that were marked as finished. Let me create a new service. Let me call it Redis. Okay, then let me double check the image that I have for Redis. Right, and then I'll map it to my local. Since we're going to have multiple instances of n8n, I will rename the current one to editor, and then I'm going to create a new service for the worker. It's pretty much like a copy paste of the editor, but it calls in the command worker. Alright, so there's a couple of environment variables that are needed in order to trigger the queue mode for n8n. Let's try it out, see if it works. Now let me check just to make sure this is running correctly. Let me check the current containers. Let me open up a new terminal. Right, what am I missing? Alright, I'm missing the editor. I think I did something wrong. So I think I know what I'm missing. I need to create the n8n database before the editor and the worker spins up. So now we're going to create a SQL script that runs when the PostgreSQL gets executed to make sure that the n8n database exists before spinning up anything else. So I will mount this file on the instance as an entry point. That way it gets initiated when the container starts up. Let me double check. Okay, so the n8n editor is actually running. Let me pull up the browser and see if I can access the application from there. Alright, here's another tick. Queue mode is done. So next we'll add modules onto our n8n installation by building our own image. This will basically introduce us to customized nodes, which we'll tackle soon. For the sake of this demo, I'll use a very simple global constants module. As you can see, we do not have that in our installation at the moment. Alright, we'll start off with a new Docker file. I'll use the same version that we've been using as a base. So the important part is setting the n8n custom extensions, because that's where we'll be installing the modules that we need. I like to add labels to my Docker images so I can easily check if I'm using the right version. So we'll add a new build only service on our Docker compose file. We'll set it up with the arguments that we need and the name of this new image that we'll use later. So let's build this image using the docker compose build command. Right, next I'll update the services that needs our custom image. Now that we've updated all the services, let me spin back up all the containers. Let me pull up the browser and see if the global constant is now available. And there it is. And tick the last box. So I hope you learned something new today. On the next video, we'll tackle custom nodes and deployment of n8n to the cloud. See you then.